Anime? No sir, not here in God's own America. That's the Segaiden promise.
But of course things may be difficult.
When is a game anime, but not? When it's also Zillion, but not? That's the magic of Cyborg Hunter. Yes, friends, this is yet another Master System release that wore the likeness of a licensed cartoon property in its Japanese Mark III iteration, but which became something else here in the States. This isn't even the last time that would happen. Unlike games such as Black Belt and Alex Kidd in High Tech World, however, Cyborg Hunter doesn't go to extreme length to redress itself. We got pretty much the same game as in Japan, except that the most egregiously telltale signs of its intended property, Chonan Senshi Borgman, or Sonic Soldier Borgman, have been moderately redrawn. Your character sprite looks slightly different here, and the woman who gives you your mission has been redrawn from the black-haired office lady to a blonde one, but she still has the same beauty mark. I guess the final boss would also be different, but I can't speak to that one. This is all par for the course on Master System. The only property whose tie-in game Sega didn't scrub of references for American and European release was, of course, Zillion. I'm positive that Zillion only retained its ties because Sega had a stake in that brand, which gave them the luxury of not having to retool sprites during localization. To my knowledge, Zillion and Borgman have no direct connection. Borgman was a Studio Ashi production, where Zillion originated with Tatsunoko Pro. I guess if you want to play 6 Degrees, you can eventually find connections. Ashi would go on to work on Macross 7, the follow-up to Super Dimension Fortress Macross, which was localized as a part of the Robotech umbrella, which shares a lot of DNA with Zillion. And that's not even getting into Borgman's curiously familiar elements, like main character Anis Pham, an aspiring teen idol with a seemingly Chinese surname, and whose family runs a restaurant. Anyway, the connections are fleeting, although I have to say that Borgman's basic main cast is remarkably similar to Zillion's. You've got the hot-headed main character, the slightly older, steadier male ally who actually leads the team, and the obligatory girl who isn't as good at combat and heroics, but does get to be the focus of the camera's male gaze during her Sentai Cyborg transformation sequences. This is, note for note, a redux of Zillion's trio of JJ Champ and Apple. They even have cool cyber motorcycles. None of this comes through in the Cyborg Hunter game, mind you. You play as Paladin, who is called Rio in the TV series, and your allies Trevor and Catherine, better known as the incredible Chuck Swager and Anis Pham in Japan, appear without context in the ending. Honestly, playing the American release, you'd never know this has any sort of external connection to anything. And yet, all of these musings about connections and erasure haven't come from nowhere, because the ghost of Zillion hovers over this cartridge. Zillion was a standout early-ish release for Master System, a very obvious nod to Epyx's Impossible Mission, but restructured to highlight the main cast of the TV series. The sequel was not that, playing as a very stripped-down linear shooting game. No, this is the real Zillion sequel. As far as I can tell, Cyborg Hunter shares no staff in common with the original Zillion team. Nevertheless, it 100% feels like a true follow-up in terms of design and overall spirit. I don't think that's a coincidence. Although Sega doesn't appear to have been a stakeholder in the production of the Borgman anime, the way that they invested in Zillion, they still had a connection to the series in Japan. The Zillion property revolved around a laser tag-style light gun combat sport toy, which shared a design with the light phaser accessory for Master System. Around the time that this game shipped in Japan, Sega released a new line of Zillion toys that tied in with Borgman. And if you play the original Mark III version of the game, the ray gun weapon is in fact called Zillion, which should be obvious when you look at it, and the way that it fires a piercing red beam. It all comes straight from the Zillion game, and it really cements the notion that this should have been called Zillion II, not that bike shooter. Cyborg Hunter feels top to bottom like a refinement and reworking of Zillion. This includes its often vexing difficulty, which starts insanely hard, becomes a bit more manageable once you acquire the ray gun, and quickly ramps up back to hair-pullingly unfair. You'll note that I used cheat codes for some of this footage, because I'm old and I don't have time for that nonsense anymore. Honestly, just consider that a boilerplate disclaimer for this channel. Where Zillion consisted of 3 discrete areas, each containing individual rooms connected by passages and elevators, Cyborg Hunter breaks its world into 7 sections, labeled A through G. Each section is self-contained and consists of side-scrolling spaces that span multiple floors, with each floor interlinked by elevators. These 7 areas are further subdivided into a set of 4 security zones, each of which requires you to defeat the current zone's boss in order to acquire a keycard and move along to the next zone. Kind of like Wario Land 4. Several zones contain multiple areas, but this is pretty much an illusion. You can walk into Area B from the beginning of the game, but you can't make any progress there until you find a shield item in Area A that allows you to bypass the energy barriers in B. Each area contains an item that allows you to progress into the next level, whether that's a keycard, tool, or weapon, and also multiple mini-boss tier cyborgs that you need to defeat in order to fully complete an area. Because you're a cyborg hunter, you know? There are 4 different kinds of cyborgs to deal with in Cyborg Hunter. Small guys who go down easily and respawn when you enter an elevator, drone types that also respawn, mini-bosses who exist in a set number and do not respawn, and the zone bosses. The full bosses always appear in their own dedicated rooms, but the other types wander the halls of each area. You can tell when you're about to encounter a cyborg because your radar system goes nuts. This is, to me, another way in which Cyborg Hunter feels like spiritual kin to Zillion. Zillion was based on a home computer game, while Cyborg Hunter has the setup and design and overall aspirations of being a computer game from that era. For one thing, it's one of the few Master System games to require use of the second controller for play. We've seen that requirement in a couple of other games, specifically F-16 Fighting Falcon, a port from MSX computers, and Spy vs. Spy, a port from Commodore 64 computers. You can play Cyborg Hunter with a single controller, but you won't get far. You need Controller 2 in order to bring up the in-game menu, which allows you to select the weapons and tools you've collected. I suppose you could theoretically finish Area A with your default build of fists and no accessories, difficult as that may be, but you have to activate the shield item in order to enter Area B, which means you're stuck at that area's entry point without menu access. The need to keep a second controller at hand feels pretty inelegant in an action game like this, especially once you reach the later areas where you often find yourself mobbed by a bunch of different enemies that require different methods to take down. The Paladin possesses 2 basic attacks at the game's outset, a simple punch and a psycho punch, which kind of works like a Hadouken. Not that anyone knew what a Hadouken was in 1989. And it consumes energy from the Psycho meter above your life bar. Most low-tier enemies go down pretty easily to basic punches, assuming you can get a sense of the rhythm required to hit them without taking damage, but higher-tier foes need the power and range of a Psycho punch. The early going is pretty brutal as you deal with minor enemies by way of tricky short-range punches and save your Psycho energy for the big guys. Things grow more manageable once you collect the ray gun from Area B, which allows you free-ranged attacks. Naturally, this changes once you make it past the first boss and find that, 1, the ray gun doesn't hit hard enough to stop most bad guys now, and 2, many areas are steeped in darkness that you can only penetrate by using the light gun. This is kind of a cool conceit. The light gun creates a burst of radiance that illuminates the current screen for just a second, with a natural fade in and out effect, giving you a glimpse of the scenery for just an instant. But it also kind of sucks because the light gun only packs half as much punch as the ray gun, which in turn has only half the stopping power of the Psycho Punch and its equivalent gun. So, not unlike a lot of original Master System content, Cyborg Hunter combines many compelling creative ideas with a frequently vexing design that makes for a pretty rough play. But the good stuff is really good. Take the heads-up display, for example. Like many 80s computer games, which clearly inspired Cyborg Hunter, the action takes place in a window that doesn't fill the entire screen. Much of the interface is given over to a stage map, which shows the current level in profile and depicts the location of elevators but not exit doors, items, enemies, or barriers. At the top left, you have the radar readout I mentioned earlier. This displays a sort of 3D threat indicator that depicts a wireframe reading of the current corridor from the hero's point of view, with enemies and doors appearing as icons that move and scale in size as they approach. It's pretty great, and it also provides an audio cue to warn you of the proximity of a high-level cyborg mini-boss. Sega's team put a lot of thought into the workings of this, and the game really feels like an attempt to combine a personal computer adventure with console action. It's just really difficult and uneven, with the scarcity of enemies balanced out by their incredibly cheap patterns and the slightly fudgy controls. A lot of this comes down to the limitations of the Master System, the low screen resolution, the lack of controller buttons, that kind of thing. Even though it doesn't say Zillion on the box, I'd call Cyborg Hunter a fitting conclusion to the Zillion trilogy that wasn't. Ambitious, creative, pretty unique, and just a little too messy to stand as a true classic. But Sega was clearly thinking big here. Too big for Master System. Not great for the moment, but it bodes well for that 16-bit console they have waiting in the wings. Sega Challenge had nothing to say about Cyborg Hunter, beyond a ludicrously basic gameplay tip, which demonstrates once again the fact that the stuff that I admire, and that Sega's marketing team in the 80s wanted to sell you, have extremely little overlap. Next time on Segaiden, Rock'em and Sock'em in this economy?